about some really weird things that happened, and that was pretty much the beginning of the strangeness for me. And in 2012, everything got really took off. At that point, I started hearing the Ohio Howl type screams from across the highway from our cabin. You know, the whoa. After that, I started asking the locals in the neighborhood if they had ever seen or heard anything odd, and I was surprised at how many of them had. They all had stories for me that they were either willing to share privately or with other people around. Most of them didn't want to talk about it with other people, but some did. But it was amazing to me how many people have been having experiences in this tiny community, but they never talked about it. So on November 1st, 2012. One of the neighbors had told me that they had heard the screams. This was a neighbor who had been telling me the whole time I'd just been hearing some dogs barking, and I kept telling him, no, it's not dogs. Well, then he finally heard it for himself. And with him was Bruce Kim. You guys might know him, he's here. He told me that he knew where the Sasquatches lived, that they were up on the mountain behind my cabin, that back in the 70s there had been some equipment thrown off the mountain down into the canyon where the creek that flows by my cabin comes from. So on November 1st, 2012, that was my goal, was to get up to the top of the mountain behind the cabin and look down into that canyon. So when I went up there, I had things in mind that weren't the things that I have in mind now. Back then, I thought that this was another form of wildlife. I didn't realize these were intelligent people with abilities that we can't even begin to comprehend. So I got up there, I knocked my sticks, and I was disappointed that I didn't get any sticks knocking back at me, and it was getting late in the day, so on my way back down, I heard a grunt. I heard, on the way up, I had heard strange talking and a grunt. Knocked the sticks on the way back down, I heard the whistles, and then I saw a Sasquatch following the herd of elk. And that Sasquatch literally vanished into thin air while I was looking at him. It was like he stepped behind an invisible curtain. And at that point in time, I had never heard of cloaking. I didn't realize that it was an option. I didn't know what I had just seen or where it went. I stood there and I stared at that spot for 10 minutes, trying to figure it out. I never saw him again. I spent the next couple of weeks trying to understand. And I went back to that spot and I watched where he'd been. I looked at it from every angle, and finally I rationalized it into he had just dropped to the ground faster than my eyes could perceive and crawled away. And after that I could talk about it, because, well, it's hard enough to tell people you saw a Sasquatch, but then he vanished into thin air. So, a little tough. But I had an explanation that I could deal with. So, things really started moving then. So, about months went by, I had been gifting, I had been going out in the woods and trying to reach out to them. And at that point in time, I really didn't know anything. I didn't know to talk to them. I didn't know anything. I started going to meetings where I had heard talking. So that's what I said. I'm not going to talk to them. One day at the store, it was slack season. The pass is closed. There's nobody coming in. The place is dead. I spent the entire day scrubbing. I mopped and vacuumed the entire place. And when I was done, I came out from behind the counter and I found this little piece of paper that said, climb a steep hill, you'll find great happiness at the top. So the next day is my day off, and it's like, well, let's do what that piece of paper said. So we go up the trail, my dog Gabby and I, and instead of taking the logging road or taking the trail, which was very rugged, very steep, we went on ahead up the just bushwhack. And as we got up partway up, it comes to a point where the road comes around and makes a switchback, and I came up over the edge to that switchback. And as I came up over the edge, I looked ahead, and I see another big black ball of hair. This one was a lot bigger this time. It explodes out of the top of the tree, and I could see it as it's going from one tree to the next, and it's a black ball of hair with one long arm reaching out like this. It hits the first tree, and that tree bends over and snaps back, and it paused there for just a minute. And it vibrated, the limbs it was on, they shook really hard, really fast. And then from that point, that tree kicked back again, and I saw the next tree bend over and snap back, and the next tree bend over and snap back. For a total of 6 trees, but I never saw it again. So I believe what happened was when he paused in that first tree and those branches vibrated, I believe that's when he cloaked and disappeared. And disappeared. All right, okay. Is that better? So I believe that's when he cloaked. So I went back. Is it going to play? Oh, there we go. Okay, so this was under the first tree that he jumped from. This is kind of old footage. I didn't have a great camera back then. But that was a 12-inch footprint. And then you can see, as I walked a little farther, there were tracks all over in this little section of ground. There's this handprint that's kind of like just a big bruise on the ground, and other smaller prints. But he wasn't the only one up there. There were several of them. After he finally hit the ground, I could hear several of them moving back and leading around the side of the hill. There's another little print. So that was the end of March in 2013. And then the next big thing was the Cloaker event. We started having campouts, and we had our first camp out, I believe it was in June of that year. There were 6 of us. We spent 4 days camping and hiking, and day and night, and we had some great experiences. And then our second camp out came along in September, and I was a little bit worried, thinking, okay, here we have people that are traveling great distances to come camp with us. What if nothing happens? Okay, well, I don't worry about those things anymore. So, yeah. So this is Claudia. We had just gone off the trail, just up the trail a little ways from my cabin, and we had stepped off just to look at some tree structures, an oddly broken tree that had been suspended at either end and was broken in the middle, and we were trying to figure out how did that tree get broken without either end of it being knocked down. And there were 9 of us. 3 had gone up the trail and just sat a little ways. The rest of us went off and were looking at this broken tree. And I had my camera on my walking stick, which I'm just standing there holding, and the camera is on and recording, but I'm not actively like making a video. It's just kind of a just in case thing. So I look up, and right in front of me, I see this little black individual. He's triangular shaped. He has no neck. His head just goes straight to his shoulders. He pops up and he takes off running, and all I can see is arms and legs and hair, and he's running. And then he's gone out of sight behind a tree, and then my friend Sam was there. And he was heading to the trail, so I was thinking that the people that had gone ahead and sat on the waffle, maybe they got a good look at him, but they didn't. He had stopped before crossing the trail. But my dad's wife, who was sitting there, had a little dog in her lap, little dog looked that way, and she looked that way. So when she looked back right across the trail from her, she saw what she described as a little black monkey came head first down the tree and disappeared into the bushes. So it was my friend Robin had brought her husband, and he was only there because she had come and he didn't want his wife going camping with strangers looking for Sasquatch without it. So the very last night, it's about midnight, him and I are sitting at the fire pit, and he's across from me. We just got this little piece of wood, the only thing that's burning, and I can see beyond him down to where my tent is. And underneath the edge of the trees, I see like this big black shoulder. And he moves under the trees, and we hear, boom, 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 boom. And he whipped his head around, and he looks back, and he goes, that was a Sasquatch. And I say, yeah, that was a Sasquatch. He gets the stick, and he starts pushing all the poles back up onto that little piece of wood. And we got some flames going, and I look around and say, now all we can see is this little circle of light around the fire. And he looks around, and he kicks it all back apart again. And then boom, 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 back through camp. And his head goes back, and he looks at me, and I say, yeah, I just came back again. So, okay, time to go to bed. He's a little freaked out. I got to go pee before we go to bed. I'm going to help him carry stuff. So I go up around the building to the vault toilet. And as I'm coming back, just as I'm about to come around the corner, I hear from the lower end of camp, I hear this big whoop! And I'm thinking, what is he doing? People are sleeping. And I take another step and I said, oh, he's still sitting at the fire. Okay, that wasn't him. So chairs and whatever else it was, I was going to help him carry back over to his tent. We get over there, and my friend Robin, his wife, is in there, and she's awake. And she's like, Barb, can you hear all this? And I'm like, yeah, did you hear the wood? She's like, yeah. She's got footsteps, she's got all kinds of stuff going on all around her there. It was like that pretty much 24/7 for the entire week I was there. I was cemented into the Sasquatch thing and all of the strangeness. There was no getting away from it. It was there the whole time. So when I came home from that, I had an entirely new perspective on what goes on in the woods. And that was just preparing me. Okay, so then in 2019, we're just skipping a lot of stuff. There are a lot of things happening, but we're just doing the highlights here. So we're going to skip ahead to June of 2019 when I went back to the woods again. One of the ladies that was camping with us, Kelly, she decided she was going to go for a little drive that day. So she goes out, she drives around, she found a place to turn around, came back, she says she saw a little Sasquatch climbing a tree, like climbing a ladder, climbing the limbs. Okay, well, let's go check it out. So we go back there. There we go. So this is what we call Kelly's Corner. And it was this tree right here, where she was turning around and saw a little Sasquatch climbing it. So we go back in there, back behind it, in the back we found the trackway through the vegetation where it came up to the tree, and it had climbed it, gone back down the trackway through the leaves, through the grass where it had left. And we also found firewood while we were there. So the next day we go back, and we're going to get some firewood. So while we're there looking around getting the firewood, one of the things that we had found, Kathy Blount, a friend, a member of the group, had discovered this stick structure here on a rock. It looks like a little individual in a tree, holding on to branches, just placed on this rock. Well, that's really neat. And then we're getting the wood. Here we just loaded up the firewood, and within seconds of me taking this picture, about 100 feet off to my left, just slightly behind me, I hear the sound of another little Sasquatch jumps out of the tree, and they all reacted. They got to see it, but it was off to my side, so I haven't heard it. So, okay, so now we've got the one that Kelly saw. We've got this one here. So the next day we come back again to document this sighting, okay? So then, this is going to play a video. So what happened the next day was we put people in the spot where it jumped down, because there really wasn't any way to recreate a little Sasquatch jumping out of a tree. None of us were capable of climbing a tree and jumping out of it. So we basically just wanted to have the camera where I was at, and then just put a person there, and then we could have distances and size measurements and stuff. So while we're doing this, I didn't realize it, but another little Sasquatch had jumped out of the tree. We got it on camera. What we got was his hand. So what you're going to see is you're going to see Rob standing there, and he's just watching. And he said he heard something. You can see him look, he reacts to something, and then he'll see the hand come down. And then after the hand, there's a log, and you're going to see the log kind of wiggle a little bit, goes up and down, and then goes sideways. And I think what happened was when this little individual jumped out of the tree, it's on the back side of the hill, he went over the back side of that log, and when he hit it, it bounced. And then when he kicked off the far side of it, you'll see it go sideways just a little bit. So there's Rob. There's the little hand, and there's the log bounce. So this is the third Sasquatch jumping out of a tree in 3 days at this location. That gives you any idea how fast they are. Okay, so that's our three little Sasquatches.
Is that also the place where Brad saw his bear?
That was it, yes, yes. We went back the next year, and instead of camping at our normal place, we camped just over the hillside from that in a new place we call Banana Camp. And one of the interesting things that happened at Banana Camp, Kathy, who woke up to the sound of plucking. Something was being plucked outside her tent. So we went and looked the next morning. She told us about it. And we discovered that the avalanche lilies had been being plucked and eaten. So you can see that the top part of the plant is completely undamaged. It's not bitten off. It's not damaged in any way. But it has a long white taproot on it. And those taproots is what they were eating. And we tried one, and they're very tasty, like a sweet mild onion. So this will show you here. We found these in little piles all around camp. And got to looking at these locations, and every single one of them where there was a little pile of these leaves was a place where there was a viewpoint into our area. So like these here, where these were found, you had a viewpoint to where we had our fire pit where everybody would sit. So I got to looking around, where else is there a good viewpoint around camp? And we did like a grid over this entire area where, let's see, there's Rob's camp right there. That was the pile that was watching him. Everywhere around camp where there was a viewpoint to watch us, to observe us, there was a place where there was a pile of these little things. So they literally were having a snack and a show. You know, it's like we have popcorn in a movie. They have avalanche lilies and bigfooters. So I made a little map here of the area. So this here represents where we had our group area, where the fire pit was. Each of the red circles is where one of our campers had a tent, and each of the pink spots is where we found a pile of avalanche lilies where they had been observing us. Pretty cool, huh? So, and this was also right over the hillside from where the little Sasquatches had been caught on camera. So, we're going to skip ahead to July of 2022, our first trip to Northeast Oregon. And, so you spend all day driving, you get there, it's late, you got to set up camp. You don't spend a lot of time looking around. So the next morning, the first morning I'm in camp, I get up and I'm the first one up. So we're kind of at the edge of this meadow, and there's a vault toilet kind of just into the meadow a little ways. So I'm going over to the vault toilet, and at the end of the meadow you can see there's this clump of bushes here. And right about there in this clump of bushes, there's this huge black stuff that's sticking up, and it looks just like a Sasquatch. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that is the coolest stump I've ever seen. And I stood there and I admired this stump for at least 5 minutes, thinking that is just so cool. I mean, it's seriously, it's a stump, but it looks just like a huge Sasquatch. So I went in, I tinkled, I came back out, and I stood there and I admired it some more. And then I went and I started the coffee and I got the fire going, and I was going to get my camera and take a picture of that awesome stump, and then the stump wasn't there anymore. It was gone. So, okay, well, I guess it wasn't a stump after all. I get looking around the meadow and there's not a black stump anywhere. There had never been a fire through there.
Stumps are 12 feet tall.
Yeah, it was a snag. Actually, this one, when we did the measurements, we
I know, I was there.
Yeah, it was 15 feet tall. 15 feet. Yeah. So, yeah.
Another story in that same spot in Vance Orchard's book, Bigfoot of the Blues, there was a group camped there, and the kids were playing soccer, and they kicked the ball that went back behind that brush, and it came flying out again. And they played a little bit longer and kicked it again, it went behind that bush, and it really got whooping out that time. So they figured they had a big soccer player back there.
So speaking of that book, this is Tracy Bozen, a good friend of mine. This is his research area. This is where he goes to go bigfooting, and he's the person that brought us here. So this book that he's reading, this is the book Tom's referring to, Bigfoot of the Blues by Vance Orchard, and he had a copy of it. And in the evening, we would sit around the fire, and he would read us chapters from this book. And one of the things that I was so stoked about was that they talked about finding just over the edge from this campground is a wilderness area. And in this wilderness area, these guys back decades ago had been in there with their mules and their horses, and they found a cave. They described it as more of a rock overhang. but it had, they had found rocks with pictures on them, and they had found rocks with stick figures placed on them. So when I heard that, the first thing I thought of was this, that we had found at Kelly's Corner a few years before, the stick figure of a little Sasquatch in a tree where the little Sasquatches jump out of trees. So this is so cool. Here he is reading us the things that they found decades before we were finding the same thing. So they literally documented like the first known glyphs in that book. So I was really, really excited when he read this. And not only was I excited, I'm pretty sure the Sasquatch were excited too, because we were hearing whistles right behind us, right there in camp. So he's reading to us, we're enjoying the story, they're enjoying the story. We're hearing about the adventures that they had decades before. And they are also excited to hear these same stories about themselves in this place decades before. That was either themselves or their parents, aunts, uncles. These were their family members that we're telling stories about. And they were reacting to it. So that's pretty cool. And that's going to play into more about what I'm going to talk about here. So we're going to skip ahead now to Whisper Creek.
Don't you remember what happened that night when we all went to bed after that?
What happened?
When they were, you don't remember them screaming and whooping and it's like,
No.
why'd you guys go to bed?
I don't
You went up ready, because it was the one that was right behind your tent. And I saw the yellow lights, the eyes over your tent, and they were moving it up. And because you had, the next morning, you had said, did anybody hear that last night? And I'm like, hello, how would you not?
Well, see, I think I had gone to bed, so I heard it, but I didn't see the eyes.
I think it was almost like, why'd you guys go to bed? We want to hear more. Come on, let's go. Yeah, I remember that.
Well, when we're camping, a lot of times back then, they don't really wait for us to go to bed anymore, but back then they would wait for you to go into your tent, and that's when everything would start going on around you. So, but that was also where Wayne had his sighting, was at that camp out, and
One of them, yeah.
Lenny had his sighting there.
Well, they had the thumbprints on their truck, too.
Yeah, there's a lot
There's
going
a lot
on.
of
Also, that's where Tracy got the recording of the Ohio Howl
Yeah.
that we've analyzed.
The metal painting.
And found out there's-
Remember that?
Little thing. And the last time we were there, he got to hear what he thought was a picnic table being ripped to pieces when he got up the next morning and there's no damage anywhere. Okay, so in 2022, we had a new place that we started going camping at. We call it Whisper Creek, today anyway. And we discovered this because we were going huckleberry hunting, my friend Heidi and I. Our normal place where we go, the road was washed out, we couldn't go there anymore, so we had to find a new place. So there's a place up the 70 road that, where there's some campsites by a bridge, by the river. We knew they'd been there. They're always pretty trashed out, so, you don't go there much. But it was on our way to our huckleberry picking spot. So as we're going through, we can see it's all cleaned up. There's no trash anywhere. And we're thinking, let's leave from picking huckleberries early and we can check out the river and look for rocks. Okay, sounds like a good plan. So we dragged ourselves away from the huckleberries and planning to stop at the bridge and look for rocks, but then we discovered that there's this beautiful campsite that's just back in the trees that we never had any idea was there. And we get back in there and there's like this little plastic bottle with a flower in it. It's like, that's an unusual sign and strange thing to find just by itself here in the woods. Okay, and we were just so drawn to this place that it was almost an overwhelming feeling of we have to come back here, we have to bring the group here. And we never even really looked for rocks. We were just so stoked about this campsite that we found. And I had a camp out scheduled in September, and that was going to be the last one of the year. But I went ahead and scheduled another one for October, just so that we could bring the group to this place, because we were just so stoked about being there. So, being something that was planned late in the season, it was a very small group. And the first night, we were all women. There were 5 of us sitting around the fire. And Okay, so here is our campsite at Whistle Creek. Right over here is where we have our campfire. There were 5 of us sitting there one night, the first night. We started hearing owl calls around us. So, all right, these are owl calls. I have an app on my phone that will identify birds, and I'm thinking, okay, if these are really owls, or are they fake owls, or these imitations? So let's turn on the bird app and see if the bird will identify them if they're not real. So I just turned on the bird app, it's sitting there recording, I put it down, kind of forgot about it. And then Donna, she's sitting right here, and I'm sitting here with her back to the river, and somebody that we could not see right here went, "Brrr." And I went, oh, there's something wrong with my well pump. I have no idea where that thought came from. And then Donna, she's finishing a shrimp, she leans forward and she goes, what the bleep was that, Barb? And I was like, well, we're just saying hi. Okay, well, since I was recording, I could go back and listen to all that. And it's very strange because we all have a very clear memory of it happening just like that. But in the recording, you hear the "Grrr," and then you hear us all going, did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. No, I didn't hear that. You didn't hear that? I heard it. Yeah, I heard it. What did you hear? And for a full minute, it's just us going back and forth like that. And none of us remember any of that. We don't get to the part where I went, gee, there's something wrong with the well pump, and what the bleep was that, Barb? Is a full minute into the recording. And we have no recollection of that full minute. None of us. Those are all the things that we said afterwards. So I don't know how that happened. So then a little while goes by, we go to bed, and this is my tent. This is Heidi's tent. Terry, she's in the far end of that tent. I'm at this end of this tent. Haven't been in there 10 minutes and I hear boom, 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 boom. And somebody runs through here between the tents. And the big boom was big enough it shook my cot. So the next morning I'm the first one up and I'm waiting for Terry and Heidi to get up so I can ask them what they experienced. And so Terry comes out and Terry, what happened? Anything happened last night? She goes, yeah, somebody ran through camp. I said, did you feel anything? She goes, yeah, my cot got shook. I was like, yeah, me too. I was so stoked. Okay, so then a few nights go by and we're sitting there by the fire and I'm thinking, we should go check the cars for fingerprints. Because that's something we do. We have a flashlight and we have a black light. We'll go out and check all the vehicles. Sometimes the Sasquatch will touch them and leave marks. Okay, so we go out to the road. It's about a couple hundred feet to walk out to the road, and there's 5 cars parked on this side. And we spent at least 5 minutes looking at each vehicle very carefully, and we didn't find anything. And then, so that was at least 25 minutes that we spent looking at those vehicles. And then we crossed the road to Terry's truck. And within a few seconds, this was the first picture that we took just a few seconds later. And you can see the J fingerprint was about like that. You can see we're kind of smeary down here, but crystal clear up there. There's also another little smudge over here. And you can't really tell, but there's more of it that kind of came up out of there. So we're looking at that, and this is 1 3/4 by 1 9/16 inches across. And you can see it's not a full print, so the only that was measured was the part that's visible. So we're looking at that, and then we took some pictures. Here's a close-up of it. This is from the second picture. You can actually see where there's a little bit of scar in the callus right here on the edge of the finger. They have the double loop here. We have a regular loop, and then there's another one down there. So then we started, I took the pictures and I said, okay, let's make a video of this. So within a few minutes of turning on the camera to make a video, we realized it was getting harder and harder to see on camera. Well, it's because it was wet and it was drying out. So you can see how the top half of it is already disappearing. So that's how much of it was missing. So he had come out of the river and touched the vehicle and left that in the dust with a wet hand. So while we're recording it, it was disappearing. And in the darkness behind us, we hear this big stick snap. Oh, he's still here. He's right there. young, and we didn't find anything new, but we could hear them paralleling us along the road up and down as we went right there in the darkness. So then there's like one more thing that happened at that camp I'm going to tell you about that was just like so strange. Lee, who's here with us today, came walking into camp and she looks up and she goes, "Oh, I didn't realize the road was right here." And I'm like, "No, the road's not here. The road goes back farther. There's like a trail from the next campsite up, dirt road, dirt trail, it ends right there. There's no road." She's like, "No, there's traffic there." And I'm like, No, there can't be." And then I see this car come around with headlights, and then goes around the bend, and there's brake lights, and another car comes with headlights, brake lights, and I'm like, "Well, I'll be darned, the road's there." Had no idea the road was right there. And then I'm thinking, well, gosh, I hope there's never an accident, because they're going to land right on camp. Well, then the time came for us to go up there and actually look at that, and sure enough, there's no road there. We walked up from the campsite next to us, and it dead ends. It's just a little bit of dirt road that doesn't go anywhere, and from that spot you have to go up the hill and down the other side to get to where the road is. So how we were watching traffic on that hillside, I have no idea.
Good drugs.
I don't think that would even explain it. We didn't have any of that. Not that we were aware of, anyway. So that was our introduction to Whisper Creek. So we're going to skip ahead now to Greenwater Camp, May 2023. So this is our campsite right there beside the river. And normally we've been having our group area be up on the hill away from the river, but this time it had been put into my head that we needed to be by the river. I had seen it in my head where to put the group area, where to put my tent, and I'm pretty sure it's because this is where they wanted us. Within hours of being there, while we're still setting up camp, we had the first sighting. We set up the potty tent, and minutes after we set up the potty tent was dismantled. We had a little garbage can that they put a branch in that had enough spring in it to hold the bag up, which was very helpful. There were 6 sightings during the week we were here. The one that I had was actually, I think, counts as 2, because I got to see it twice. We had gone up on the hill above camp to do some drumming. And it was dusk when we went up, it was dark when we came back. And as we come back down to the group area, I stepped aside just to put my drum in my tent. So that just put me a few seconds behind everybody else that was walking back over. As I come out of my tent and I'm walking back over and I look up, and right in front of me, 30 feet away, there's a Sasquatch standing there, so tall, thin as a rail. And I'm thinking female just because it was so narrow. And she's perfectly lit, backlit from the fire that's over by the river. And she turned and took like 2 steps that were like, you know, the John Cleese funny walk. It's like she's all legs. And just like these 2 long steps, and she's gone into the darkness. So I'm like so stoked. I go to the fire, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the Sasquatch, she's right here, just right here. And they're like, did you see the stick? And I'm like, what stick? There's a Sasquatch over there. And they're all excited about a stick. And I'm thinking, what stick are you talking about? The Sasquatch was just right here. So I went over to show them where the Sasquatch was, and that's where this stick was. Everybody else that had come down ahead of me had noticed that there's this very little, tiny little delicate branch that had just very, very carefully balanced up behind Heidi's vehicle. And it was right there where the Sasquatch was standing seconds later. So while they're excited about the stick, I'm excited about the Sasquatch. So then I go up on top of the hill, and I'm going to tell Mary and Debbie and his other friends about what happened. And while I'm up there, I saw her again, because my tent was just over the bank from there, and I had the lantern on. So I'm facing that way, and I see her pop up and take off running. This time she's backlit from the lantern from my tent. And as she takes off running, I see one of those flashes of white light like what happens before the clover. So I don't know what the flash of white light has to do with anything, but it happened. So that was our May camp out last year, how we started off. And our May camp out in Greenwater is always crazy, but that was the best. One of the things that we found was this butt print. Kind of hard to see in here, but this is huge. Right there, you can kind of see where the legs are coming out. And we were there just after the snow had melted off, and the rodents, they cuddle underneath the dirt under the snow. So when the snow is gone, the dirt's all lifted up and very fluffy. So that's what he sat in and made this very clear butt print right there. You can tell by the size of these feet how big this butt really is. So one of the other things was we had these handprints. One of the ladies, Ashley, on her way out of camp had spotted a footprint beside the road and wanted me to go back and cast it for her, which I did. And while I'm waiting for the casting material to cure, I look over and back about 30 feet back in the woods, I see this paler patch of dirt. So I go over and look, and you can see this is an arm print. And then right here, we've got this little footprint. The camera will show you, measuring it, how big all that was. And then I'll go through it. You can actually see down into that finger, the finger marks there. A little footprint right beside it. So that's what was waiting for us. So they anticipate what we're going to do. They know where we're going to be and what we're going to do before we even know where we're going to be and what we're going to do. So we're going to skip ahead now to this last winter, and this is something that some of you have probably already seen before. The fairy orbs from December this last year up behind my cabin. We had one of those Pineapple Express that come through, and it had been torrential downpour for a few days, and it finally had started to let up, so it's like, gotta get out and get a walk. So I took Goldie up the top of the hill, and the air just was, you could feel the energy in the air that day. It was amazing. I have gotten to the point where I can actually feel and I can sense when things are going to happen. And I used to look at other people and think you're just really sensitive, but no, I mean, that's a real thing. You can tell when something is going to happen. And it was so thick in the air that day, you almost cut it with a knife. And as we're going back down, there's a little dry waterfall that with all the rain we had, it was running again. So I stopped and I paused, and I just had a feeling like I needed to record. So I recorded like 10 minutes looking up the waterfall, and I turned it off, and I turned around and I recorded like 30 seconds. Like another 10 seconds looking down where it came out of the road. And then I just turned the camera on, and my glove was on the screen, and I turned it back off, and then I got to thinking, I don't really know the point of this, but I feel like I'm supposed to be recording, so I'm just going to turn it on, and I'm going to frame it so that I got Goldie in there, and I can get a nice screenshot, you know, of her with the woods and everything. And so that's what I'm going to do. So from that point, I turned it back on, and we're walking down the road, and I'm not looking at anything out here. I'm looking at the camera, trying to frame this beautiful screenshot of my dog walking with the trees in the background. And that's what I did. So then I get back to the camera, and I go through the video, and I find the perfect screenshot, and I post it. And a friend says, oh, it looks like there's a Sasquatch reading the newspaper in the background back there. So before I delete the video, I better take a closer look. So I go to the video, and I zoom in on the background, and it's like, I think it's just a shadow, and then I see something zip across the screen, and I said, what was that? So I back out again, and I realized there's like this little white thing comes flying out of the camera. So I took some screenshots, and I'm thinking, well, that's not a hummingbird, that is not, what is this? Is that a fairy? So I sent those to my friend Arla to verify, yeah, that's a fairy. So then I got to look at what else was in the video. And not only did I find the bright one that flies right at us, a few seconds later, there's a fast one that comes right at us the other way. And then I started checking the video that I had taken by the waterfall, and just that one little, like 1 second clip that I had turned it on and turned it off, but my glove is half on it, that has 2 more. So I'll show you those. I have them all edited together here in a little video. So here's fairy number 1 flying at us. Here's some screenshots from that. It looks like Tinkerbell. So here comes the second one. This one's fast. slowed down. And at one point back there, just after it took off, you kind of see wings. But I measured that out. It was a minimum of 123 feet in less than a half a second before it passed us. So that's 168 miles per hour. A hummingbird's fastest speed is 49. That's how fast that was. And then here's that little clip. I had to slow this down to like 1/16 speed just to really get a look. And even then, they're nothing more than a streak flying by. So those are the fairies. And after this, I discovered that, well, they're not just on that road. They were down at the cabin. I saw them along the creek. The white one, she's kind of like a leaf that just floats around. She's really bright, but she's fast, but she's not fast like the other ones. And the other ones, they just look like orbs. I took my friend Heidi up there a few days afterwards, and she's playing the flute when I saw one about that big fly right past me, and then another smaller one went right past her. And they literally look just like what you see here. They're just orbs, except for the bright one, and she just kind of flutters around. So I don't know if these are maybe some kind of where they have like she's the queen and they're the workers type of thing. I don't know exactly how it all works for them, but they're real and they're out there and they're hanging out with the Sasquatch. So we're going to skip ahead. We're going to do a little bit of backtracking here, but just to stick with the orbs, we're going to skip ahead to May this last year when we went back to our green water camp. On the first night, we've been seeing a lot of orbs. Normally they're like lights and things like that, glowing lights, balls of light that you'll see flying around, bursts of light, flashes of light. But we've been seeing that stuff around camp, so we decided to go for night walks. We walked out to the main road, and we're standing there in the darkness side by side. And there's a lot of moonlight, and at the very end of the road, we could see something moving. So we're all kind of standing there and focused on what that is, trying to figure it out. And then kind of off to the side here, I see like this brilliant green flash in the trees. And a few seconds later, I see one of these little solid orbs, not the light ones, the solid ones, like the fairies are flying past Carrie right here over her shoulder. And then a few seconds later, there's another one, except this time it's like cantaloupe size, comes right at me. And I see it when it's like right here, and I lean, and it went right over my shoulder. And I was recording when it happened, so, well, a few minutes after that, I said, thank you for hanging out with us before we left. And from behind us in the tree line, we heard this, "Rrrr." Well, I was recording, so I went back and I had the headphones on to hear if I could hear that. "Rrrr." Well, it was behind us and too far away, and it picked up, and it's really hard to hear, and it doesn't sound much like what we heard. And I thought, well, let's check the rest of this while we're at it. See what else is in the recording. Well, I didn't realize it, but I had picked up the sound of this one because it flew over my shoulder. So if you listen carefully, you should be able to hear that. Like that. Okay. Let's look at it from the bottom of your eye. Oh, we just got buzzed again. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Did you? I just saw something. Yeah, it just flew right at us, went right over my shoulder. Oh. Can you hear it? That little whoosh is going by. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so now we're going to back up a little bit to the eyes. The first thing that happened was the fairies in December. We skipped ahead to May to show you this little recording. We're going to go back to March behind my cabin. And this was the day that I had acupuncture, and my acupuncturist, Miriam Foss, she's absolutely amazing. She's telling me about this lady that she listens to for meditation. And she is also seeing the fairies. One of the things that happened afterwards was I started getting messages from people who had seen them in the past in the same vicinity where I was. And I was getting messages from people who had, once they had seen the video, were now seeing them around them. And the acupuncturist was also seeing them. So she told me that she listens to this specific program for meditation, and then the fairies come. okay, well, after acupuncture that day, I got the same program and I listened to it, and it was wonderful. So then I'm sitting there, and I'm supposed to relax after acupuncture, I'm not supposed to do stuff, but I need a project to work on, so I'm thinking about this thing that happened at the trail years ago. I don't have any footage, but if I just had some video and some pictures, I could do a little voiceover video. And there's a little bit of snow on the ground, there was snow then, and all I gotta do is I can just walk up there and just get that, and I can work on this. Okay, I'm stuck, I got a project. So I didn't even get dressed, I just threw my coat out over my nightgown, we went up the trail, and it was duskish. You can see this is one of the photos that I took as I'm going up there. It's not dark yet. And so I took a couple of pictures, and then I'm just going to take a little bit of video and go back and work on my project. So the second picture I took here, and you can see there's nothing there but woods, right? Well, then I turned on the recorder, and I always announce when I'm recording, just be polite, be respectful. And I knew something had happened, I didn't know what. But when I got back to the cabin, discovered this here. This is the original footage. I'm recording. See it? I'm recording. Slow it down here so you can really see it. I'm recording. Okay, so remember how I told you that their eyes don't reflect? It's internal. This is a very good example of that. After I taught this, I knew something had happened, but I didn't know what, until I got back to the cabin and started looking at the footage. And I went back up there to this same spot for about a week or so, trying to figure out exactly what it was and pinpoint it. And it made it really easy because there was this little dead tree that's forked. It was like a sight that I had to look right through. They looked right out through that, so that made it really easy to pinpoint it. And behind that, it was wide open for 60 feet till the next brush vegetation. There's a little cluster of small trees that were right there. So I did my recreation photo up here by hanging my lantern in there. That is literally 75 feet from the camera and hung at 5 feet. So that's pretty much exactly where this was. He was right in that spot. There's this little opening in the trees, except for he was a little shorter. I think he was either sitting or squatted down. He wasn't quite as high. So another thing about these eyes is, if you look, we're going to zoom in on them here, you're going to see that the eyes, the glow is in front of the eyes. You can actually see the eyes behind the glow where it's being emitted. So it's going to go frame by frame. Okay, this is frame number 3. I didn't even realize this until just recently, but you can actually see the shadow in frame number 3. And you can see the eyes behind the light. This is the lighting version. And then there's the last frame. So not only in frame number 3, you get to have the outline of the head. And so this is like literally less than 100 feet from where the Clover event happened back in 2014. So you've got the outline of it right there, and then that the last one where you can see the eyeball looking at you. So you got the Sasquatch eye right there as he's turning his head away. So I was filming at 60 frames per second, and he's only visible in 5 of those 60 frames in 1 second. So that gives you an idea of how fast he turned his head and looked at me, how quickly that was. So that brings us to the tree catcher. So back in June, a tree fell on my cabin. So I was asleep when it happened. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, I was sitting up in bed. My eyes were open. My dog is at the foot of the bed looking at me, and I'm looking at her. And I know that there's a tree going to fall. I know where the tree is. I know where it's coming from. Even though it's dark and I can't see outside and I just woke up, I know this. And the first thing in my head is don't run because you're just going to run under the tree. Just stay put. Okay, wake up. I'm sitting up. I'm awake. There's a tree coming. The tree falls. And yeah, it didn't do any damage. There's literally not a single shingle that was damaged. So another thing that happened here was the fairy orbs were seen in the days before and just after the tree fell. So I don't know if they were part of this, but back we're going to skip ahead to. So we're going to skip ahead to August. That was in June and August. Penny was here with the dog. She came up, and we're sitting there in my yard campfire, and I'm telling her about the day that the tree fell on the cabin, and how grateful I was.
Campfire with propane.
It was August. It was fire season. I have a real fire pit out here, but we couldn't use it that time of year.
I see a lot of logs out there.
Yeah. So we're sitting there, and I was telling her about how grateful I was that my cabin had been spared, that I had been woken up and told not to run, that this had happened the way it was, and I was talking to her about my gratitude about this. And as I'm talking to her, the air fills up with this sulfur smell, and it was very big. It wasn't like a bad smell, but it was all around us, and it was just there. And okay, so this is acknowledging what we're talking about the gratitude about my tree, this tree not landing on the cabin. So then the next night, Terry joins us, Debbie and Lee joins us in the yard around this fire pit, and Penny and I are telling them about how the night before we had been sitting right there talking about how grateful I was that this tree hadn't harmed the cabin in any way, and the smell came back again on cue for all of us right there, and then it went around our little group, and everybody got their own scent of this sulfur smell, except for Terry, who also got the scent of flowers, which I think maybe Mama Sasquatch was there too, because she always smells like flowers. So got to smell it one more time. A little while later, we were getting off our tents, and Penny has like this little 4-person tent with a queen-size mattress that's in it, and it's very hard to zip it up. So as I'm walking to my tent, she asked if I could zip her in. So, okay, well, I'm going to go put my stuff down and be right back. So I walked past her tent to my tent, came back, and then that sulfur smell was all around her tent again. And we have not smelled it since. So to me, that was our tree catcher acknowledging the gratitude for saving the cabin, and myself and my dog. So that brings us up to Green Water Camp just this last month. Once again, we've got our group area right there beside the river. We had gotten into the habit of telling stories about the Sasquatch around the fire, and Ralph is here. He's our official storyteller. He does an excellent job. They come running when they know Ralph is getting ready to tell stories. At this particular camp, they didn't even wait for it to get dark yet. I was standing right over here, at the edge of the river, and I could hear the splash, splash, splash as they're coming in, and it's not even dark yet. And Lisa, one of the new ladies, she came and she stood beside me and asked me what I was doing, and I said, they're coming to listen to the stories. And then we hear the splash, 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 splash. And she's like, I hear them, they're coming. And I was like, so they're coming? And then we hear splash, 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 splash. Oh, there's a little one coming too. So now she's all excited. She's talking to him. So she's standing there talking to him, and the little one, you can hear he's like slapping the water in response to what she's saying. That is just so cool. They really want to come and hear these stories. They love Ralph's stories. They love hearing about how they're heroes. They love hearing about themselves. So the next morning, we get up and these lead marks are right over the bank where you can see somebody who's very wet, laying here on the bank and drained off. And then right up above you can see where there's handprints. We think maybe they were laying on their belly and then one hand was reached up and Yeah, so that is one large individual that was stopping wet, came out of the river, laying on the bank, listening to our stories, listening to Ralph's stories. Pretty cool, huh? So normally when they come up to the river and they're listening to stuff, you get to hear the movement, you get to hear different sounds coming from the river as they're responding to stuff. But people on the other side of the fire don't get to hear that stuff so much. So what can we do for a visual? So those are the finger marks there. So Terry, she's also a ghost hunter. She has these little flashing balls that I think are originally cat toys. They, any kind of motion will set them off and make the lights go off. So she gave me some of those. So I went ahead and along the bank, I put one just downstream, I put one out on the Route 1 in the river, and then I put one upriver on a stump that kind of overhangs the water. And so this way, you know, they've got something that they can play with, and maybe other people will get to have a visual, not just the stuff that we get to hear, right? So put those out, it gets dark, sitting there, and I hear Lisa over here going, "Oh my God, there's the lights!" And I didn't know it at first till later, but Russ had seen the first one go off. He went down to the bushes over here to pee, and the one closest to him, it went off. And then a few minutes later, Lisa gets to see that one get picked up and moved approximately 8 feet from where I had put it down to the top of the little trail here where we walked down to the river. And then a few minutes later, the one that was farther upstream on the stump went off. And the one that was farther upstream, to keep it visible so it didn't roll down off the stump, there's like these two little bits of stick that were there, and I kind of set it down into the notch so to keep it steady. And when I went back to check on it, it had been moved from there, and it had actually been pressed down into its own little divot. So that's just to show you here. That there's a little ball, and we'll show you where I left it. And then there's one out there on the root log. So also, when she said she saw the light going, I looked over my shoulder and I saw the light. And from where I was sitting, I was thinking it was the one out on the river, not the one. I didn't realize that one had been moved from there to here, all the way from there to here. That's what she saw was when it was being moved. But when I look, I'm thinking it's the one on the river. So I go down to check that one, and it's funky down there. There's a smell down there. It's not too bad, but definitely a smell. So then here's the one upriver. Show you where we were at. Area there. Okay, so then that was the most amazing camp out. That was just this last September. And when I got back to the cabin, a lot of times after campouts, I get back to the cabin and I'll be greeted with an owl call or a knock, whistle, something will acknowledge that, hey, great camp out. And this time I got back, I pulled into the driveway, I opened the car door, I put one foot out, and right across the road I heard this huge, just like a out of the ballpark knock, just big crack. Okay, that's awesome. So then that night, I'm in the cabin, I was trying to sleep with the window over the creek open, and I hear sticks breaking, big snaps. And I go out the next morning, and there's this X, these branches are laid on where the creek flows into the river. And a lot of people think that the X is a keep out. A lot of people have different ideas of what it means. But we have been taught this is a welcome, this is a greeting. And it fits everything we've ever experienced with these. This is a greeting. This was my welcome home. So for several days, things kept happening. I looked out the window, and the view was blocked. I used to have a nice view of the neighbor's trees, and now all of a sudden I've got this vine maple. It's kind of hard to tell if these are hanging upside down. It's kind of flipped over. So it's now, this is 15 feet off the ground out my window. These are now flipped over the other way, blocking my view. I had a little bird's nest on my porch where I collect things that the Sasquatch gave me. I have some bird shells in there. This leaf was added at some point about the same time as the vine maple was flipped over on the other side of the cabin. And then I started on the trail to go for a walk with Lily one day, and as we're crossing the road, I hear this big knock. Another one. Okay, that's cool. We started the trail getting up there a little ways, and there's two big lot of stick cracks by the creek. Stop, we're looking, there's nothing there. Start walking again, two big stick cracks. Stop, look, there's nothing there. Start walking, get to this, start on the trail where it turns away from the creek, and I look back over my shoulder, and that's where I saw the tree catcher. It was on the other side of the creek, and he was as big as a tree. And all the other Sasquatch I've seen up there were black. He was not. He was kind of an orangish, reddish brown. And as I'm turning, my eyes are focused on his hands. He's got these hands, and his knees, I can't capture his knees in my drawing, but his knees were kind of like this, kind of almost knock-kneed. His hands are down here, and his hands are massive. And going through my head is, this is your tree catcher. This is the guy that's been with the sulfur smell. This is the guy that saved the cabin. This is your tree catcher. And yeah, I'm so grateful. And I'm also very grateful that I can be here to share this with you all. And